Sometimes organizations are too focused on leadership and forget that management is often just as important, sometimes more, right? There's a big difference between we're storming the hill, and people are like, how? And the leader is like, no, we're storming the hill, but how? Right? Like, no, we're storming the hill. You guys will figure it out. I know you will. Well, no, management is a crucial component because not everybody can figure out the most effective ways of getting up the hill.
Welcome to the Raquel Show. This show is for entrepreneurs who want to play bigger in business and in life. And today I have a special guest that I have known for a long time. We got connected because we worked for the same CEO, but at different companies. And he's one of the best thought leaders in the industry that I know. The way he thinks about things is so different. And it's no wonder he's accomplished a lot in his business. He's a real estate entrepreneur and a business leader. He's been a CEO of one of the largest expansion teams, and he turned that around to profitability. He's grown a brokerage from 59 agents to over 400 agents, and he's been a top producer. In this landscape of things constantly changing, I think it's important to talk about recruiting talent, whether you're an agent that's looking to build a team or an agent that is at a company that has agent attraction or recruiting people to build businesses together. And I can't think of a better person to talk about this with than my guest, Vlad Kats. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Honored to be here, Raquel.
I am so honored. And this is a guy that was in my corner when I was running an expansion and asking him all the things. So I'm excited to dive into it. As someone that has built incredible things in our industry, how important is it finding the right talent to work with?
I mean, on a scale of 0 to 10, it's probably 12 or 13.
Okay.
Look, many of us will consider ourselves to be in, let's say, a leadership business, if you will, and the number one question is, who are you leading? And oftentimes, and I know you have a lot of experience with this, when you talk to leaders or managers, what you realize quickly is that they're actually not leading anybody. They are pushing somebody up the hill. And that's not leadership. Okay. And so I think that the difference between pushing somebody up the hill and somebody else pushing you up the hill, if you will, or the company, or helping you push the company up the hill, is the degree of talent that is around you. And look, this conversation about talent can be like a 2-week type of a conversation. So I'll stop there and let you ask any subsequent questions on that.
Right.
Most important.
So, I mean, you've recruited a lot of people. How do you define or how do you find somebody that is an A player that you want to bring into your world?
A few things. Before I answer the question, I have to preface it with like how I think about talent in general. Okay.
Yep.
So I think that the word talent is being watered down and or overused a lot. This is just my impression of not just the real estate industry. I think it's a caveat in many different industries. And I learned English when I was a teenager. So words really like matter to me, the definition of words. And again, like the overusage or watering down of a concept of a word, like kind of is nails on a chalkboard for me. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So a few things about talent. And I saw this when I was going around Mid-Atlantic teaching a recruiting/hiring course for the company that we were previously with. Mm-hmm. And here's one of the things I realized is that the only way to use the word talent properly for me is to look backwards. So talent is known in historically rather than saying, oh, this person is going to be talent, which is most of the time what is actually meant. When we meet a person that kind of knows what to say and has the look, tall enough, let's say polished enough, we're like, oh man, that's talent. But what we actually mean is he or she talks like a talent, right? And we believe that they may be talent moving
So
forward.
potential talent.
Right. It's kind of like if we take, Tom Brady, right? You can say whatever you want about the guy, but clearly he's talent, yes? However, he was not considered talent coming out of college, like NFL talent,
Mm-hmm.
obviously picked last, right? So we know now that he's talented. We probably knew halfway through his career that he was talented, but it's only looking backwards. So that's one thing. Any questions on that? Anything we need to unpack there?
No need to unpack. So I want to know, how do you find your key players, or how have you identified A players after building so many different things?
Yeah, so it starts with knowing the role. Okay, so it's one of the things that's not mentioned about talent is talent for what? So it has to be talent for the role, if you will, right? So Tom Brady is talent for a quarterback, but he sucks as a running back. Same
Yeah.
sport, same side, offense, defense, even 5 feet away, but he would be terrible as a running back. Yes?
Yeah.
So you first have to be crystal clear on what is the role that you want this individual to play. Okay. And by the way, I know you can relate to this. Most people don't have clarity in the role.
That's where a lot of people fall, right? They
Yeah.
just think, this person's a top producer. I'm going to go stick them into being a rainmaker, or I'm going to stick them into being a recruiter. And then you watch them going, how come they can't perform at the same level that they were when they were a salesperson managing them just themselves?
Yeah. And they don't realize that what they just did is they put a quarterback into a running back position
Mm-hmm.
or a receiver into a tight end position. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, so closely related, but yet there is such a big difference to professionals on the field.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that's number one reason why people fail in roles is that the roles are not clearly defined. And so then it kind of happens like, oh, run there, run there, run there, run there. And then people usually don't go anywhere. Okay. So that's where I start is the very clear definition of the role. And look, you and me go way back enough where we used to split hairs about what does the person have to do or not have to do.
Correct.
And oftentimes that actually helped.
Yeah,
Would you agree?
of course. And my question to you, is someone that's been a top producer and then went into the leadership side, what did you have to learn to be from like a receiver to a quarterback? It's a totally different ballgame.
Yeah, it for me. Thank you for putting me in that position to think back a decade. For me, it started with being crystal clear what the role was. Second is, okay, what skills are transferable from that quarterback to running back position? So, for example, it was prospecting skills, right? And I was a prospector in my real estate sales business, in my short sale processing company, short sale sales team business. So then those skills transferred fairly well to leadership slash recruiter business. Another is I'm blessed with a high level of logic. So like I can actually look back and figure out, okay, what not only does what transfer, what doesn't transfer. So the big difference between top producer and a top recruiter is that the top producer is a very transactional role. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The job there is to convert, let's say, a client, buyer or seller, right? And then work with him or her for the next 30, 40, whatever, 60 days, right? And then move on to the next one. Whereas in leadership and recruiting, what I used to say is your job starts when they move their license. Your
Mm-hmm.
job starts when they join your team. Whereas the top producer, by the time I was getting to that point, like the job was pretty much over, right? Because when you sign the listing agreement and a decent market is going to sell, boom, you're done. Okay. So I knew that going in that I was going from a transactional business to a business relationship business, which
Love
I
it.
think helped me a lot. And then I would say the third thing is I was able to take my business skills from previous endeavors, if you will, previous businesses and industries, and take them into sales and then into leadership and recruiting. I'm a consultant challenger, if you will, at heart. So I like to figure out how to make things work better. And so it's a highly transferable skill, I think, when it comes to recruiting or leadership, because what people are looking for is a problem solver. All of us are walking around with problems. The only question is whether we know whether we have them or not. And it was my job to figure out what those potential problems may be and solve them sometimes ahead of time.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think one of the things that you get to do when you get into leadership is grow talent once you recruit them into when you said your job starts there. How do you retain talent? So sometimes what you'll see is you grow talent and everybody wants them, just like an elite athlete, right? It's like everybody, once they hit the Tom Brady status, like who wouldn't want to recruit them for their team? How have you retained talent in
Oh,
your companies in the past?
I was just reflecting on it with a friend, and what we realized is that when it came to our brokerage or top people, nobody left, and it forced me to think about it. So I was literally thinking about it earlier this week. Okay, what caused the people to stay? And by the way, to add to your previous question is, I think talent. I think that great people are everywhere. The only question whether they're talent for a role, and most people look, especially in real estate, look too long for buyers and sellers and not enough for great people that can fit roles that they have. Okay.
Mhm.
So, what causes talent to stay? So, look, I would say the normal stuff, the big vision, the big opportunity. But look, typically those are words. Here's what I realized. One is the approach that I took with great people in my life is I always assumed what you just said is that people are calling them all the time and trying to recruit them to their ventures, okay,
Mhm.
or to themselves.
Mhm.
And even though it's a safe assumption, it's actually inaccurate because very few people actually call top people.
Oh yeah, I was a
Weird. It's
yeah.
like people like you, for example, should be getting 100 times more calls. That I don't know. It's weird for me, right? But there's this allure. Oh, I wish I had Raquel's level of expertise, blah blah blah, on my team, results, blah blah blah, Vlad result, but nobody calls. Very few people call. I remember this from recruiting, when building the first brokerages. Oh no, and I started from the top. So I took the production report and I went to the top because those are the most fun conversations to begin with,
Mhm.
right? And they're like, you'll be surprised, nobody's calling me. Nobody's calling me. It's only when you get to middle of the pack or bottom, they start complaining everybody's calling me. My assumption was that everybody's calling, and I know that was inaccurate because I know in my head it wasn't, but I just still assumed that everybody's calling Tina, everybody's calling Raquel, everybody's calling Teal, everybody's calling Lon, everybody's calling Phil in the blank. Okay, everybody's calling my top people if they're mega agents. I knew very few people did, but that was just a safe assumption. And then I was able to actually communicate with them with that expectations. Look, if somebody calls you, go take the meeting because it's your job to make sure that you're in the biggest opportunity for yourself possible. The last, everybody runs away from a person that tries to hog people, right?
Mhm.
I don't know if
So
they're
true.
right.
So true.
That was one. And then the second, I challenge people. One of the things I realized that the high potential people want to be challenged.
1,000%. Mhm.
Right? If I'm trying to be their friend, if I'm trying to be their cool guy, I'm not cool, and I'm a pretty good friend, but it's not my priority. And it was just challenge them to get better, not at what I wanted them to get better at, but what they wanted to get better at. So I remember conversations with you like they were 2 weeks ago. Is like you were always trying to get and getting better, not just trying, getting better at like how do I get into higher level conversations with more people? How do I get to the closing? How do I get that move, right? And it's intricate, but you were always trying to get there. And top people always want that extra inch, extra two. And I would challenge, like you can probably ask anybody that was on my leadership teams, is like, Did Vlad challenge you? And I think the answer is going to be yes. I think that those are the two main components that caused me to retain folks.
Yeah. So if you were, I love this conversation around talent and retaining talent. And you obviously led a brokerage and many brokerages where you've had tremendous growth. That's not a walk in the park. And I know that you're very familiar with the landscape today. If you had to start all over, knowing what you know today, and you had to build a team or you were given keys to a brokerage, let alone like a failing brokerage or a turnaround brokerage or whatever, what three strategies would you do today to grow it?
Would
Knowing
cut,
your competitors.
yeah, I would cut any expense that. So strategy number one is cut any and all expenses that are not required to maintain a brokerage. That's one. Number two is I would focus on top producers, mega agents, because I believe that the future of real estate industry belongs to not just like cappers or $3 and $5 million producers, the top 1% of 1%, especially with the NAR settlement, where the brokers go. And I think that there's going to be a lot of influence and money that those individuals gather. So I would figure out how to position whatever brokerage platform I have specifically for those people's needs. And third, I would say is I would make sure that ancillaries were firing on all cylinders. Since I got into brokerage space, margins have been compressed drastically by competition and just the space itself, because it's a competition for a limited number of transactions, right?
Sure.
And nobody can actually grow transactions. That's more of the economy, people, etc. So that increased competition have actually shrunk opportunities on the margin side. So I would figure, so ancillary support, create a padding. Those would be the three things that are off top of my head.
How would you get agents to your company?
So I think that there is three reasons why why people get real estate licenses. Let's just keep it inside the real estate space. Reason number one is to build a business slash career that supports their lifestyle. Okay. Believe it or not, very few people actually get there. So in today's environment, probably 100K in commissions is the minimum for that. Probably a lot more, and very few people get to that level. Unfortunately, so far, I have some solutions for that if needed. The second, once that box is checked off, then we start focusing on building wealth that supports our freedom. And once that box is checked off, even fewer people get to the question of how do we build a legacy that maximizes our impact on this ball of fire. Okay. And I see people go through those. Sometimes they jump, sometimes they go back. I like in the progression. To answer your question, I think that you figure out who your target audience is. So I call it ideal agent profile. For me, it would be people who are transitioning from the building a career to building wealth. Okay. And creating a platform, you're in one, I'm in one, that actually straddles that space where I'll call it automatic wealth building, where agents can do both. So I think that 5 years from now, Raquel, it's going to be weird to be in a brokerage that doesn't help you build wealth right away.
Yeah, so good. You are one that always is looking ahead. What do you think team owners and brokerage owners today have to watch out for as they continue to grow? Speaking of that.
I think that it's actually both have to watch out for each other, because I think that what's starting to happen is there's potential friction that is starting to get bigger and bigger between the brokerage owners and the mega agent teams. I think that mega agent teams, again, the future of real estate industry belongs there, and I think the most money is in sales. And I think that the better run a real estate sales team, the more overall profit potential there is. The profit potential in brokerage space is in brokerage platform that spans the United States. Like local brokerages, it's going to be harder and harder to make money. It's already hard to make money.
It was hard a few years ago.
Exactly, and it's only going downhill from there. So like where you're going to see is in my opinion, I'm already starting to see that, is like the bigger the team in a, let's say in a local player, the interests are totally misaligned already. Now, a bigger team on a platform like Real or EXP or maybe LPT, the national company that has wealth building opportunities, etc., more aligned, but not 100% aligned. So I think that there needs to be a higher level of alignment between those two players as we move forward.
So good. So good. There's a lot of deep thought, and I'm sure a lot of our broker owners that are listening, or team owners, because we have a majority of that in our audience, are probably going, wow, some knowledge to like really think about. On the flip side of that, you've ran multiple things all at once. You've done it really well. A team, brokerage, investment business, expansion team, you name it. And you were still always up for more. What would you say some of the key tips are to managing it all, even with a family?
Look, looking back, I know that it wasn't as pretty as it could have been, right? But one of the things I learned early on is that it's one thing at a time to a certain place. So I never started two businesses at the same time. So it's start one. So for example, start my real estate sales team. I was at per MRE, I was at sixth, seventh level. Okay. And I went to my team and said, look, can you function without me? And they said, absolutely. In fact, we're getting tired of you. Why don't you go do something else? And that's when I went to the brokerage space. Okay. And the team was running on its own. It's still
Right.
like in fact, they did more transactions the year after I got out. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to take it personally, guys. It's build a brokerage to a certain level, find a leader. And by the way, there is a leader also in that, or a manager, leader, whatever. I sometimes use those interchangeably because I think sometimes organizations are too focused on leadership and forget that management is often just as important and sometimes more, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a
Mm-hmm.
big difference between we're storming the hill, and people will like, how? And the leader is like, no, we're storming the hill. We've been in, Raquel, in those situations, yes, but how? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how?
Go figure it
No,
out.
we're
Yeah.
storming the hill. We're storming the hill. You guys will figure it out. I know you will. No, management is a crucial component because not everybody can figure out the most effective ways of getting up the hill. Okay. It's okay. Then you build the next, you get it to a certain point, replace yourself as a leader, then go to the next. So it looks like it's multiple things, but it's rarely all things at once. And of
Or
course, messed it up a lot.
all the same priorities as number one, right?
Yes.
Competing priorities. And you just know, I think, at a certain level of what is actually first priority between the businesses.
Yes. And you know which one requires 75% of your time. Yeah. It's trying to be like Elon Musk is sexy and romantic, but it's for most of us, that's not it. Do one
Yeah.
thing at a time.
Yeah, so I think you bring up a really good point because there's a lot of people on social, especially with social today, that are building multiple things. And you may think that like it's fine, dandy, and gravy, but I'll tell you, it's very unsexy inside. When you peek under the hood, it is not as easy as it looks like on social media. So I want to say thank you for being transparent and bringing that up because I think it's really important, especially nowadays where focus is really hard with all the distraction is, oh, I could build this real estate team and build an organization and build an investment business and build ancillary services and maybe have a course online.
Yeah, just to be safe, right? Because that's what everybody's doing. It's a sure way to build absolutely nothing.
Nothing well. That's
That
for sure.
that is certain. I thought about this earlier when I realized Tina, our mutual friend, challenged me to put a bunch of business lessons on Facebook for 30 days straight, and I'm like, I started putting some of those together, and I got up a dozen. I'm like, okay, what else? And one of the things that hit me the other day, like after I started that list, was that most businesses pretend that they are a well-built house when in fact they're usually just tents.
Mm-hmm. So
And
true.
it's easy on social, it's easy to be an optimist, it's easy, but man, you look under the hood And it's not only is it messy, but it's also weak. It's always messy. Go to Google, you go to Apple, you certainly read, I mentioned Musk, you read his biography that just came out a few months ago. It's messy as F, but
Yeah.
it's strong. It's messy inside of a strong
Controlled.
foundation,
Yeah.
which
It's
is very
controlled
different.
chaos is what they say.
Say it again.
They say it's controlled chaos.
Yeah. And most businesses are just chaos. It's not even controlled. And so that's for me the distinction. There's a big difference between a foundation and a house on that foundation versus a tent, right? So
Speaking of books, what have been some of the books that you have read that has made an impact in your journey?
I'll tell you, I'll give you the list of books that could have replaced my graduate program. Okay, this is, and it was in entrepreneurship. Okay, and I joke about it. It was a great few years. I met a bunch of amazing friends and professors, so it was great. Okay, but I joke that the following books could have replaced it. Book number one is Leaders Eat Last / Start with Why. You can combine those two, right? So Simon
Mhm.
Sinek. Book
Right.
number two is Lean Startup.
Mhm.
Book number three is Predictable Success.
Yep.
Okay. And if I had to pick a fourth one, only because of the execution component, because those first in Predictable Success touches on it, to pick four, it would be either 4DX, Four Disciplines of Execution, or Traction,
I knew you were
depending
gonna.
on
Yeah.
what somebody goes in. You read those four, three and a
Yeah.
half.
Look at what's on my desk.
Oh, there you go. Gino.
But I have a
Cool.
list of books right on my floor.
Here's what I will say. This may be controversial, Raquel, so I want to get your opinion. Okay. First time I'm vocalizing this. This is one of my lessons. Is there's so much pressure in the industry to read a shit ton of books. And so people plow through one book a week. Well, look, I've tried that. I don't know how much you retain. Okay. So my idea is one book 52 times.
I like it.
We used to go to Torah study for years, right? Old Testament. It was every week we talk about a section of the book, and then after the new year, it starts over again. Same with Bible study, right? It's one
Yep.
book entire life, and then the people will tell you after 50 years of studying, they still don't know anything. And so we have all these amazing books, I think, but they all come down to like few ideas, right? Look, my summary of how to be a better partner in the relationship is listen better,
Yep.
communicate better. And then there will be a book on how to, there's 150,000 books on that. Just
Hmm.
find one and read it 100 times, read it 50 times. Like that book that you lifted, right? The Attraction, dude, that's a study. That's a
Yeah.
process.
I've read it so
That's
many
not,
times.
yeah, that's not a book you just read once.
Yeah.
If you
And you're
do,
at different spots when you read it in your
exactly.
life.
And you pick up a new thing, right? So the books that I mentioned, every time I pick them up, like sometimes I'll just go to like middle of the book or something like, oh crap, like I now read it differently.
Yeah.
So if I want to start a movement is find a book and read it every week.
I like it. I like it. I do agree with you that a lot of people out there will say a book a week. How many books can you skim through or read through in a year? I think I've just gotten more purposeful and intentional. If I want to study, let's say this podcast and how to build a podcast, I'll get all the books on podcasts and then I'll pick my favorites of what's your favorite book. And then I'll go to the experts of who's actually doing it. Yeah.
There you go. That's a much more effective way of studying something, right? I've met so many people who are like, man, once I pick up the book, I have to finish it. And I'm like, what if it sucks? You still finish it. If you start a movie on Netflix,
Yeah.
right? Like, and it
Yeah.
sucks. Do
Yeah.
you finish it?
No.
Yeah, it's weird, right? It's like sometimes like Krista and I will start a movie. It's like, and I'm like, honey, does that suck? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, we're moving on. I'm not going
Yeah,
to go another 2 hours or an hour and a
yeah,
half of a thing that I don't like. Now, somebody else may love that movie, so they should watch it 100 times. I
yeah.
don't like it. I'm moving on. So one of the people come to me, like usually the conversation centers around money is what book should I read? I give them two things. I say, It doesn't matter what books you read as long as you read them. So go to Amazon with your Kindle, download a bunch of samples, don't buy anything. Start reading 10% of it. If it calls you, buy
Yeah.
it. If it doesn't call you, move on.
Yeah.
We'll
Yeah.
never read all of them.
Vlad, you've done a lot, I think, in your short time of this industry, and I know you will continue to do a lot. You talk about really maximizing the difference we make on Earth, and you said it a little bit earlier, and maximizing your impact. So, what is next for Vlad Kats, and what does that actually mean when you say you want to maximize your impact?
Raquel, I do not have an answer for that. That has been a thorn in my side, to say the least. Here's what I mean by that. There's again, it's so much conversation about making a difference. But here's
Mm-hmm.
the thing: people like you and me can stand on the corner of Find a Busy Intersection and give out $5, $10 bills,
Mm-hmm.
or we can go and volunteer for an hour and kind of make a difference, but I don't know for whom that difference is made.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, people, based on my experience, people do those things and it makes a bigger difference for them than impact out there. The question that I've been attempting to answer, and I ask all of my friends, I would love to hear your opinion on this, is first of all, are you about making an impact or maximizing the impact? Right? And then how do, well, actually, let me ask you, so which one is it? Making or maximizing?
Maximizing.
Okay, so how does one do it?
For me, and I'd love to hear your answer. For me, I think about all my different hats that I wear, starting with family first. How do I maximize the impact that I'm going to make on my children? And if I was gone today, what is it that I would be proud when I look back and visit them? I say, like spirit or whatever you want to believe in, that goes, you know what? I've made an impact in my life in the time that I was there on earth.
Okay.
And then I would think about what are my roles that I have, my team, the people that make an impact to our business. How could I actually not only make an impact for them every day, but how do I maximize that to the fullest? And do I go back to bed at the end of my day and go, did I create impact? And could I have done better?
And if the answer is you could have done better, what is the, if
Then
the,
you adjust, right? Because then you think about how could I have done better, and you adjust and you get 1% better every day.
so you fall into that take action, iterate, take action, iterate, take action, iterate. Okay.
Yeah.
I find myself in a philosophical inquiry. Okay. There's not right or wrong, right? I find myself like, okay, what does maximization mean for me? And then thinking through and then maybe have a few more conversations. So I like this is very helpful. So I'm like, what does that look like to maximize? To be honest, like that's the answer I don't have. Okay. In terms of what's next for me, it's going to be either a bigger role in the brokerage space. Because 2 months ago, I think I shared this with you before. 2 months ago, my wife looked at me and said, Vlad, you look freaking bored because I've technically been out of operations for the last couple of 2, 3 years. And so it's either going to be a deeper role in a brokerage space or it's going to be a bigger role in the wealth creation space.
I
One
love
of
it. I love it. And
the
as we wrap up, there's always a question that I ask every single guest on the show is what does Vlad Katz do to play bigger in business or in life?
it's put myself in conversations like these. I knew that you were like when I said yes, that it was not going to be business as normal or business as usual. I'm serious. Is how do I put myself in the conversations with people I admire because the questions that get asked force me to think bigger.
Amazing. Any last minute advice for our audience who is listening or watching this on YouTube on how they could continue to maximize their impact or recruit talent or have and finish a great 2024 this year?
I would say that it's in order to do all of those three is start by looking in the mirror,
And
and
then people are like, and then?
that's it. Look, what it's I was in a leadership program years and years ago, and one of the assignments, Raquel, I'm not kidding. One of the assignments was stare at yourself in the mirror. Not like glance, make sure hair is fine, but just look at yourself in the mirror, look into your own eyes for 5 minutes and see what comes up.
Yeah, very powerful exercise for sure.
Yeah.
Vlad, I want to say thank you so much for being on our show. I always appreciate you. I've appreciated you from the moment I met you. You've been a mentor, somebody that I know that I can go and ask questions, and you will, like I said in the beginning, you're a thought leader that I highly respect in this industry. And I can't wait to see what you do next. I know you're going to do something amazing, something big, and I can't wait to keep supporting you in playing bigger.
Much appreciated, Raquel. The feeling is more than mutual. Thank you for everything that you're doing for the real estate and the business community. It means a lot.
Thank you.